Greetings and welcome to episode 39 of the Sustaining the Herd podcast, brought to you by Agri-Services and Engineering of Raymond, Nebraska. I'm your co-host, Andrew Wadle, and I'm joined in the studio with my co-host, Brock Vitek. How you doing,
Hey there,
Brock?
Andrew. Doing good today.
Good, great. And so, welcome back to our past listeners. We really appreciate you tuning back in, and we really appreciate the feedback we get from you. In fact, we had feedback from a listener this morning on an episode idea, which will be coming to you soon. We'll keep that a mystery, but it'll be good. So thank you, past listeners who've come back, and welcome to our new listeners. We're adding new listeners all the time, and we really appreciate that. And everybody seems to be interested these days in sustainability and innovation, and sustainability is what we talk about here. So for our new listeners, so what is sustainability in the eyes of Agri-Services and Engineering? Well, it's lots and lots of things, but we break it down to three simple things. And the first is protecting the air and the water, and that is particularly as it relates to animal agriculture. How do we operate facilities in animal agriculture and keep contaminants and pollutants out of the air and the water? Everybody wants clean water to drink and clean air to breathe. The second is resource efficiency, doing more with less, productivity. We're going to really dig into that today. And so resource efficiency, doing more with less, is a big part of sustainability. And the last part of sustainability is, maybe more like a softer side of sustainability, and that is business sustainability. It is, we need to have businesses that are profitable so that they can be sustainable and that they continue to exist. And how do we grow and develop people to operate those businesses so that we have a really strong agricultural economy related to innovation and sustainability? So those are the things that we talk about here, and I think we do a pretty good job, don't we, Brock, of kind of like hitting on each of those points.
I sure like to think we do.
Yeah. So hey, Brock, what do we have in store for this episode?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Andrew. Well, I think you teed it up very well. Today, we would like to talk about opportunities for innovation in animal agriculture and livestock production. We know that innovation and sustainability go hand in hand. I think any time that we have innovation and improvement in the industry, that leads to more sustainable production in all of the ways that you just talked about, with clean air and water, improved resource efficiency, and sustainable, profitable business enterprises. And we know that if we're sustainable, we're able to stick around to be innovative and continue to adapt and evolve in production in the future. So with that, we'd like to talk today and hopefully maybe inspire our listeners. If anyone's thinking about how could I possibly help make a positive impact in the livestock industry, or just to really get people thinking and make folks aware of all the great strides that have been made as the industry has evolved and changed in the past several decades, but also where we think change and innovation might take place in the years to come. How's that sound?
Yep, I think that's right on. And all this is so important because population is continuing to grow, and at the same time, urban sprawl continues to happen, which is part of growing population. That is, people are going to come on out and start wanting to be living closer to the farms and feedlots and ranches, dairies, and so this is all super important as we look forward as a society. But I thought it'd be a good idea, and this will be the how great we are portion of the episode. And what I mean by that is just going to kind of give you a very brief glimpse of how far we've come, how much where we've come as a result of innovation on a couple of commodities and products that we talk about in agriculture. And so, the first is very near and dear to my heart, Brock, and that is dairy. And when you look back to 1940, and 1940 is really, the 40s is really a key year, and we can talk about that why in a moment. But let's just say 1940, the milk production per cow was 4,400 pounds per cow per year. Okay, 4,400 pounds per cow per year. Any idea what it is today, Brock?
Oh, if I had to guess, it's probably around 24,000 pounds per cow per year.
Yeah, you're well read, Brock, so you know this, so it wasn't really very hard for you. So
Lucky
we're
guess.
looking at we've had a five-fold increase. Milk production per cow has increased 5 times, and that is rather remarkable. And that it goes to what we'll call pillar number 2 of sustainability, that doing more with less, maximizing that resource. Another one is corn production, right? So 1940, corn production was around, corn yield was around 20 bushels per acre. And Brock, I suppose you know what corn yields are today.
Well, here in Nebraska, we have the best corn and the most abundant corn. Sorry to all my friends in Iowa. So I'm guessing we're probably somewhere between 150 and 200 bushels per acre today. Is that close?
That's what I would go with 200 bushels, and especially for my simple Michigan State math, 200 bushels per acre, 20 to 200. That's a 10-fold increase from 1940 to today.
The folks in Iowa would say their yield's a lot higher than that if we asked them.
Of course,
that's my guess.
Would. Of course they would. So, hey, that is remarkable, and when you look at how much, what we're doing with fewer resources, and just talking about 1940, what happened in 1940, Brock? Do you that made those increases? Because you can go right on down the line. We could have the same conversation with soybeans and wheat and whatnot. Any idea of why that is?
You're testing me a little here. Can't think of a specific event that happened, but a lot was happening around that time.
Yeah. Well, I think world wars tend to do amazing things. I
was thinking World War II, but didn't know if there was something very specific or if you were just shooting for World War II in general. Okay.
Out of adversity comes innovation. So and then post-war, we had this baby boom, and people had money they didn't have before, and everybody was really excited, and demand for everything increased, and agriculture responded. But 1940, that's right around the time commercial fertilizers came on the scene, right?
Sure.
And of course, there was development of hybrids. I mean, there's a whole host of things. But when you look at some of these really landmark events that increased yields, the finding of or development of commercial fertilizer was huge, and so for our producer friends that listen, exactly how important commercial fertilizer is. But for our friends, for our people in town who are listening, what this means is, prior to this, manure was used, and boy, we like talking about.
Don't talk too much about commercial fertilizer, Andrew. We want people to know how good manure is.
That's right, and so, but manure is variable, right? And so on the scene comes commercial fertilizer, and now you can pinpoint apply the exact, reasonably speaking, the exact amount of fertilizer you need in order to achieve a certain yield. And at that point, crop production just went through the roof. So that's a pretty cool innovation, and what I think that looking back, can be viewed as maybe one of the more substantial innovations. But with that, boy, do we ever, Brock, have a long way to go. We're not done innovating in this industry. And as I led with, we need to be, because population is increasing, land is shrinking, and as they say, they ain't making no more. So
they ain't making no more.
Yeah. So where do you see the opportunities, Brock? Where are we going from here?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of areas where there's innovation opportunity in livestock production. And before we jump in here in just a moment, I'd like to preface this for all of our listeners by saying we're going to talk about some things that you've heard us talk about before here on sustaining the herd, at least some different topic areas that we've dug pretty deeply into. But today we'll zoom out a bit and talk about opportunities for growth and innovation and improvement in these areas. So hopefully some or a lot of this sounds familiar to you all. And the first area I'd like to talk about that we dug into very recently is nutrient management. We talked about this with anaerobic digestion projects just a few episodes ago. You just said land, they ain't making any more of it. And that's right. Land is a limiting factor just in general for production agriculture because there is only so much of it. But especially when we look at livestock production. If I have a feedlot, a dairy, a swine operation, a poultry operation, you name it, I only have so much land around me that I either own or that I have access to through relationships with local farmers. And livestock producers are regulated, as our great colleagues Travis Casperson and Nick Maskey talked about quite a while ago in a couple of episodes. We talked about compliance and nutrient management. Our listeners might remember those conversations. And we're required, and even if we're not required, we should still try to be good stewards. We need to make sure that we are not over-applying manure. We're doing it in an agronomically responsible way. And that means having an adequate number of acres to spread that across so that we're not applying too much, getting nutrient levels too high on any particular acre. And this it is really a challenge for livestock operations. And there are technologies out there. You talked about some, precision agriculture, but we have a long way to go here. And I think this is one that we'll be innovating on for the next 50 years and beyond. And I know you probably have some thoughts on this too, Andrew.
Well, I think if we were to drill right down into what does that mean for nutrient management and manure, it really boils down to segregating the nutrients. These nutrients that are in manure can all be recycled. However, the proportions of NP and K, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, as they present themselves in manure, they are, using a very scientific term, out of whack in terms of what, say, corn uptakes. And so we can apply for nitrogen, but yet then we over apply for other nutrients.
That's
meanwhile,
correct.
Meanwhile, we can have acres far away from the farming operation or feedlot or dairy or swine facility that are absolutely hungry for phosphorus because they've never received any manure from animals. They've received all commercial fertilizer. And so the challenge becomes, how do we take this manure effluent where everything is out of whack, and how can we separate the N, and how do we separate the P, and how do we separate the K? Well, now, if we can do that, now we're back to 1940 again, where we have this N product that we know the analysis, we have this P product that we know the analysis, and we have the K product that we have an analysis. And so now we can precision apply these nutrients. And so this is the next big thing when it comes to manure management, and that is the nutrient separation.
Absolutely, you hit the nail on the head there. It's being able to separate those individual nutrients from the manure, so it's more like commercial fertilizer, and it can be applied as needed. This might be a silly analogy, but imagine going to the grocery store and you couldn't buy just flour or just sugar. They came pre-mixed in a random proportion, random ratio. And you go home and you try to bake something. Well, it might have way too much sugar in it or not enough, right? It's no different. We want our ingredients to be separate so we can put the recipe together how we want and need to. It's kind of the same thing with fertilizer or manure in this case.
That is a great people in town analogy, Brock. That's really, really, really.
I really hope the grocery store does not start offering that. It would be a bad deal.
And it just never fails. Whenever we do make any comparison or relate manure to people, food always is part of the equation, and it's. Anyway, it's part of our.
I love bringing manure and food into the same conversation. So yeah, I think that probably covers it for now on nutrient management. But just something for the industry and people outside of the industry who bring a fresh perspective to be thinking about. Always room for innovation in nutrient management.
Yeah, and that's really and that's a good point too. A lot of people like us, we are deep into this in the animal ag industry and the technologies that are associated with animal ag. It's sometimes it's a fresher breath of air, not only fresher breath of fresh air, but a need to have people come from outside of our industry to come and solve some of these problems. Now, granted, sometimes they're absolutely crazy and they don't know shit, so to speak, as because say animal agriculture or animal manure is a lot different than say industrial waste and things like that. But this isn't come one, come all. Where we in animal ag, we understand that we don't have all the answers, and people from other industries, and we're looking at them right now, right, Brock, on these nutrient separation issues. They're not traditional manure handling companies. They are an industrial waste companies come one, come all. It's a complicated challenge, a complicated problem that requires sometimes complicated solutions and thinking outside of the box.
Definitely does. Very good. Well, let's move on to another area for innovation. That is automation. Agriculture, looking back from 1940 until today, holy cow, has agriculture become very mechanized, very automated, very technologically advanced. But there are still opportunities for more automation to come in. And I think an area where this has the most potential, or one of the areas where it has the most potential, is labor. I don't care what industry you're in, whether it's food service, livestock production, retail, software development, basically anything on the planet. Labor is one of the greatest challenges that everyone's facing.
Sure.
And livestock production is certainly no exception to that challenge. And, there are so many tasks, mission critical tasks, I might add, like feeding cattle, looking for cattle that are unhealthy and need to be treated, all those things. And sometimes could be less than desirable tasks, especially if it's below zero and it's a blizzard in Nebraska. But I think automating those tasks holds the most immediate potential for impact. And a great example of this is automated feed trucks. We had Jacob Hansen with ALA Engineering on in an episode a while back. I absolutely love what Jacob and his team are doing. It's a great example of bringing some innovation to automation in ag. And I think there are many more examples where that could take place. And the feed trucks are just one. I'm excited to see those guys continuing to develop that and get it commercialized and get it out on some yards. But what are some other areas where we could see some more automation, Andrew?
Well, the thing that struck me too about the automated feed trucks, and this statement doesn't hold just true to automated feed trucks, but this is where it presented itself to us, is not only with automated feed trucks do you reduce labor, but you do a better job than if you used, potentially, you do a better job feeding. When I say do a better job, a more accurate job feeding cattle as opposed to a human.
Did I just hear you say resource efficiency?
Resource efficiency. Yeah. So, okay, for our people in town, what does that really mean? So you've got a feed truck loaded up, and you know that you're going to feed so many pens or so many groups, and you need to make it needs to last. That load needs to last for however many pens or groups. So you start at pen or group number 1, and you have to get to 5 or whatever. you start seeing, you set your ground speed, you set your engine speed at a certain rate. Well, what happens if you don't quite get it right, and you start running low, and you're only through group number 4, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to go faster, and those last pens are going to get less feed than the first pens that you fed. Does that make sense, Brock?
That does make sense. And just for those listening, just 1 second, Andrew. A feedlot, for example, or a dairy. You'll have a continuous feed bunk. It's a feed trough lined up, across several pens in the truck. Or in a dairy, they just have a feed wall, not a trough, but similar concept. And the truck has a little chute out the side, and as it drives along this feed trough or feed bunk, the feed ration comes out of that chute, falls into the trough, and they just do that from one pen to the next as they go down the line, just to help you visualize it.
Yeah,
Proceed.
And so thank you, Brock, and that's a good description. But so that's something that we talked with Jacob about. But I tell you, another one that is huge is scraping manure on dairy farms, right? So dairy cows, 3 times per day, 2 or 3, let's say 3 times per day, are moved out of the free stalls. And when the cows are out of the free stalls, the barns are scraped. The manure is scraped out so that cows maintain a clean environment. Typically, most often, it is done either by vacuum tank or say a rubber tire on a bobcat or a skid loader. And so people. But this is something that's just so tailor-made for an automated process, and also an example of where, hey, you scrape manure, you could get to going too fast, and if you get to going too fast, you could be pushing manure up into the stalls. And are you getting the manure off the curb floor interface? And when you get to going fast, good chance you're not. So automation, this is a process that can be automated, and I think we're really close to being there. The need is surely there, both from the quality of the work that's required, as well as sometimes there's challenges with labor. So that's another one I see. There's a lot of opportunity.
For sure. It's being done on a small scale with robots, but I'd say nothing, larger. There's some opportunities for innovation there.
It totally is. And we have some clients that are doing it, and so, but I would say it's I'm not sure if it's quite ready for prime time yet, but by golly, there are people who are innovators in this and Brock, do you know what the definition of an innovator is?
I think I do, but I'm struggling to put it into words. I've heard a pretty witty definition.
It's someone who pays too much for something that doesn't work like it should.
There you go. I like that one.
So, but has great potential to. Okay, that's the key. They pay too much for something that doesn't work like it should, but it has the great potential to.
That's great.
So I think that's where a lot of these technologies are. But so.
Yeah, one more we might hit on before we move on to the next area, Andrew, is I think milking systems are another area where there's some opportunity for greater automation. Do you have any thoughts on that, being a guy with a dairy background?
Well, I would say we're lurching in that direction. We're lurching in that direction. By the way, I was thinking about this episode, I was reminded about a conversation that I had with my good friend, who I'm guessing a lot of you know, Gordy Jones. And, Gordy Jones, he tells a story. And someday we're going to have Gordy on. I'll have him tell the story for real, but I'm going to tell it secondhand. So Gordy came out of vet school, I think he said 1976. And he had just been to some hotshot milking equipment school. And he arrived on a dairy in Wisconsin, and he said, so he was ready to solve some problems involving milking equipment. And this is in the 70s, because people were deep into using milking equipment. So he said, so what kind of milking equipment you use? And he says, the guys just held up their hands. This is 1976, and people were still milking cows by hand. And so, boy, we've come a long way. We've come a long way since then, when people were milking 6 cows per hour by hand. So where are we today? Robots are being used to milk cows completely, and I've got to emphasize completely, meaning cleaning the teats, and prepping the teats, putting the equipment on, and then post milking sanitation and hygiene. Mm-hmm. So there is that technology is available, but it's really being done on a smaller dairies are using them. In other words, the milking robot capacity is still relatively low. What we see, what I would consider to be quite mainstream these days on large operations, is that pre-dip and post-dip. That is tending to the teats prior to milking and then after milking, so that pre-dip and post-dip operation. So that it's that piece in between the actual milking of the cows on a large, high capacity. That's the part that I would still say is under development.
As well as hooking the cows up to the milking machine, like in a large rotary parlor, that's still manually done by a human as well.
That's still done. Yeah. So it's that middle piece. Yes, thank you, Brock. It's that middle piece. It's after the robot pre-dips the teats, then the human puts on the milkers, and then the milkers come off, and then a robot post dips the teats. So there is human interaction, and that human interaction is putting the units onto the cows.
So that's opportunity for innovation.
Opportunity for innovation, for sure.
Yeah. So the next area I'd like to dig into, and we've talked about it a few times, is resource efficiency. And we could hit every aspect of the industry here, but I'd like to hit on some specific areas I'd like to get folks thinking about, and ways that we could go about figuring out some ways to innovate. And that is just reducing waste across the board. I think that's a big one, whether it's waste of feed, water, energy, whether that's electricity or fuel, and other production inputs. And I should reframe how I'm saying that. Waste might come across a bit negative, but rather, how can we more efficiently utilize these resources? Maybe we're not, spilling a bunch of extra feed on the ground, but are we potentially using more than the cattle need? Dr. Jessica Sperber talked about this in our last episode. She said, we go to the packing plant, and cut open an animal, and if you see there's a lot of extra fat, that's feed that did not go to pounds of beef, and you're not getting paid for by the packing plant. That is essentially waste. So there's actual, feed waste that, maybe getting spilled on the ground, or are we feeding that to animals, but it's not producing the product, beef in that example, that we're getting paid for? Just a few ways to think about that.
And how does that get solved, Brock?
Oh man, if only I knew. It's a good question. I think it's a lot of things. It has to do with all the way back to the cow-calf operation and breeding decisions, with the animal genetics being more feed efficient. I think it has to do with the ingredients, the feedstuffs that we're feeding to these animals in their ration, as well as their environment, which gets more into what we do here at SETI Agri-Services and Engineering. Making sure that the facility and the pens are set up in a way for those cattle to perform well. It's their veterinary care. It's everything involved in the production of that animal, I think, does ultimately impact that issue, for example.
Yeah. It's amazing. I'm not sure what the most current figures are, but at one time I know that the cost of feed on a dairy is something like 40-50% of expenses. And, it never ceases to amaze me how there continues to be so much research and research dollars spent on still continuing to improve rations, to improve efficiency, and I suppose on the beef side it's the same thing from the standpoint of feeding rations and the genetics to kind of fine tune some of these things.
Oh, you're exactly right. I might even take a step back. This was a few years ago. Was at a meeting with some cow-calf producers, an industry meeting, and the speaker got up and said, "Does anyone here know what the most expensive line item is in a cow-calf operation?" He said, "It's feed." Now, you may not have a high feed bill, for the mineral or supplement or some grain that you're giving to your cattle, but why do you have tractors? Why do you have hay balers? Why do you call the hay grinder guy to come in and grind your hay? That's all for the production of feed for those cattle. Sure. Not just at a cow-calf operation. In a lot of ways, it's not any different at a feedlot or a dairy or in confinement. But feed is expensive. So many of the things that go into an operation are for the production and delivery of feed. So many opportunities to innovate there. And this is just one example I'm talking about with feed waste or being more efficient with the usage or utilization of feed. We can get into, like I said, water conservation, taking an even further step back, feedlot or dairy, for example. These large operations buy a lot of grain and a lot of feedstuffs from a lot of local crop producers. Not to mention they produce some of their own feed as well. But it takes a lot of water to grow an acre of corn or an acre of alfalfa, right? And we can be more efficient with that. And as you said earlier, producers have gotten so much more efficient in the last 50 to 100 years, but there are still opportunities to do better there. And if anyone is thinking about how can we make a positive impact on the industry, I'd encourage them to think about resource efficiency because it applies to everything across the board.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about innovation when it comes to animal health and welfare, and because I think it's another area where we rely on humans, and humans do a darn good job at it, but still it takes humans. And,
it does,
and those humans are getting harder and harder to come by. And so, what's the future looking like, you think, Brock, when it comes to innovation, when it comes to animal health and welfare?
Yeah, good question, Andrew. Great topic, by the way. I see this a couple of different ways, and please share your perspective here as well. One, I think that anything we can do with technology to potentially automate some tasks or have technology help humans with those tasks is great. But also, we know it's hard to find skilled, qualified human beings to do these jobs. How can we better enable them and equip them in those roles so they may have less decisions to make and they can focus on caring for these animals in the best way possible? And so the first thing I said about how can we, use technology and innovation just to make things better to begin with. So hopefully we can reduce disease and prevent disease and just help animals to be healthier to begin with. I said genetics earlier. I'm going to go back there again. I think genetic improvement holds so much potential to lead to improved health outcomes for livestock, because it really starts, when breeding decisions are made for animals, and depending on their genetic makeup, they may or may not be, more prone to certain diseases. And I think back to when we had John Schrader on from Dar Feedlot for a couple of episodes. John is a leading cattle feeder, and he said a feedlot's a cesspool of disease. I think I'm quoting him almost verbatim right there. It's disease is present in a feedlot, and I think genetic improvement is one way that we can help to combat that and help those humans who are out there doing their best to keep these cattle healthy and comfortable. And I know the breed associations and folks who work in livestock genetics are working very hard to do this, and it's a constant battle. I don't think that there's going to be one day when we can say, oh, we got it figured out. These cattle are all disease resistant. No, because diseases, viruses are constantly evolving. So that's something I think we need to stay on top of until the end of time.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And the fact that dairies and cattle feeders, talk about these things is a testament to how important it is important to have animals that are healthy, and so keeping animals healthy are super important. And so how can we do this in a way that is more efficient and even better than humans? And I think that we see the technology being developed where we have the sensors in the groups of dairy cows or in the feedlots where so what happens now? Somebody goes out in a pen of cattle and they see snotty noses and they see runny eyes, coughing or whatever, and
Heads
these
hung
animals,
down. Yep.
head hung down or whatever, not
leg,
getting up,
not walking right, all these signs, symptoms.
Yeah. But you can't take a temperature, can you, Brock? From afar,
from the back of a horse.
Right. Or absolutely. And so, this technology is being developed, this facial recognition, so that the algorithm recognizes not runny noses and not runny eyes and not droopy this or droopy that, and so imagine, right now where we have cowboys or dairy workers walking through groups of cows and cattle, visually seeing this a couple times a day, once a day, whatever. But imagine if it was done in real time, all day, every day, and I feel like we are so close. We are so close to having that figured out. And
I really think we are. And I think artificial intelligence has a role to play in this as well. And, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention AI. It's the cool thing to talk about these days, right?
Yeah, but you're cool, so,
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. I think you're the only person who's ever told me that. Really appreciate it. To all my friends listening, Andrew's a real one here. But, I spoke with Dan Curtis at the AgTech Connect conference when he was here in Lincoln a while back this summer. And we talked about artificial intelligence. And, Dan and I talked a lot about how it's not just AI replacing people or doing things people can't do, but kind of like I mentioned earlier, it's enabling people. It's helping the human beings doing the jobs to be able to do those higher level, higher skilled tasks that might actually take a human touch, such as going out in the pen and handling the cattle and sorting out those that are sick. But this helps them to better identify them and do that quicker in a more efficient and accurate way. And I think that's where things are trending. And AI could certainly, play a role in that. Just an example for all of our listeners. Let's think about, we have a pen of feedlot cattle, and say we have a camera and a sensor mounted on a pole, or in a dairy barn or in a swine barn, you name it. And let's say that it identifies that steer 197 has 197 on its ear tag, has a snotty nose, and its head is kind of hanging down, and it hasn't moved much compared to the other cattle. Well, what if that would send a notification to one of the pen riders or cattle health specialists on their smartphone? So when they're going through pens, it says, hey, steer 197 and pen 325 is showing symptoms of sickness. Pull this one and expect it and possibly treat it. I think that's a game changer. As we face labor challenges, we can do more with less labor ultimately. Doing more with less, that's resource efficiency.
Well, yeah, I mean, you get... And
that's just one example.
You have a sick animal, the quicker you get it out of the pen, there's less of a chance you're going to, say, spread something, it just has this knock-on effect of positivity.
Yeah, it really does. And I think at the end of the day, I don't care if it's talking about resource efficiency, animal health and welfare, nutrient management, any automation, any of the things we talked about. At the end of the day, I think it all really leads to improved environmental sustainability. because if we are doing more with less and we're producing more food, more product with less resources per unit of output, I think that's a win for everyone. We can be better for the environment. We can do more with less. And I think it ultimately leads to more profitable businesses, hitting all those aspects of sustainability. And that's why innovation really matters to the livestock industry. And that's what I want all of our listeners, no matter who you are, what you do, what your background or expertise is, be thinking about these things. Whether you're a consumer who cares about where their food comes from and how it's produced, or if you are a livestock producer listening, we should all be thinking about these things.
Yeah. On that same token, to our listeners, we've hit a bunch of topics here.
Really
dairy feedlots, crop production, manure management, nutrient management. What did we miss? Or not only what did we miss, but what more would you like us to dig into? And so drop us a line, and by all means, we love to learn. We love to hear from you, and we can dig into some of these things deeper. We don't want any really solid topic to go unrepresented.
Yeah, please do drop us a line, whether that is on our social media pages or send us a note to podcast@settje.com, and we'll be happy to receive that, and we'll get back to you in a timely manner. So, Andrew, with all of that, I think we've really covered the bases of opportunities for innovation here in the industry today. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I think my wheels are turning up in my head here about how we can continue to innovate. How about you?
Yeah. Yeah, let's do it. It's what kind of gets us up every day, isn't it, Brock?
Let's keep on keeping on.
Solving difficult challenges when it comes to animal agriculture.
You bet. So with that, thank you to all of our listeners, both returning and new, for choosing to spend some time with us today. We look forward to being back with you again in a couple of weeks. But until then, thanks for joining the herd today.